Okay, if I could just ask people to find their seats and we'll get ourselves underway. Okay, I think it's looking excellent. We'll get ourselves started. Welcome to all of you. It is lovely to have such a large group with us for the rich conversation that will unfold this evening. We thank you on one of the first really beautiful evenings in some time in Vancouver. That you've chosen to spend it with us is an honor. There are many incredible people in the room, and we're grateful that you've chosen to be with us this evening. My name is Stuart Points. I'll say more about myself by way of getting underway shortly. But to begin, we want to ground ourselves in the place where we are, to locate ourselves in the traditional unceded territories. And to do so, we're very honored to welcome for a cultural sharing and a welcome the Squamish Ocean Canoe family who are going to come forward, and I'll let you know, be prepared to not sit.
I gotta take my glass out. I am. Chin Kwaman Tomi Aeroswat Sim to Sequators. Kwaman Tomi Sim to Winalxium. Kwama tomi sim te klakwachit sim te sioko kwachit. Natak lucky oko meos kohop mastamokchit. Ne sewa sim to kohos sequatals kwaman tomi sim. First of all, thanking each and every one of you, our respected elders, matriarchs, chiefs that are in the room. We are the Squamish Ocean Canoe family. We are Squamish. We're an alcohol and drug-free canoe family. We welcome you to the village of Leki Leki, a Squamish village, place where the maple leaves fall. And Simon Fraser University has many campuses, some located in Coquitlam, in Burnaby, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Catesy. We are honored that you're here in our village of Leki Leki. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That song we entered with comes to us through our great ancestor. His name was Chief Joe Capilano. His ancestral name was Saaplak. He sang that song when he walked into Buckingham Palace with Chief Charlie from Cowichan, Chief David from Shuquepnup. They received an audience with the king of the day, King Edward VII, pleading with the king, please don't eradicate us. We are still here. And that was the first time indigenous people were lobbying with the king of the day. And we are still here. We're still very much alive, very much proud. And yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wait, Keita, Lolam, Swait, Sim, to Tum Tum, Slolam. Oh, you can clap. That song that we offered and the dance that goes along with it is known as Tum Tum Solum. Our great ancestor, her name was Emma Douglas Sisoliot. She was the first wife, the first Chuash to Grandpa Dominic Charlie. They lived just around the corner from us in a village called Huai Huai, known today as Lumberman's Arch. Again, Sisoliot would go and cleanse her body by going into the waters of Mother Earth, asking Creator for guidance, asking Creator for protection. She did that every morning, and that song is known as Tum Tum Solum or Snowbird. Swakquis not solum, wait.
What do you think?
Swakquis solum. Oh. Hot quick while, greeting of the day. Our dear relative and nephew, really honored to see you. I get to see you everywhere now. Yeah. So thank you. So can't forget my nephew.
And he'll join us in this next dance.
Now he has to dance. He's like, oh. Oh, one Hatsu Squallens Wait Sim. That song we offered the song and dance to is known as Hot Kukwaya, from our great ancestor. Her name was Sequoia. She too lived in the village of Huai Huai, Lumberman's Arch. Again, Sequoia would go into the waters of Mother Earth, again cleansing her body, her spirit, asking Creator for guidance and protection. So I just finished coming back from Ayatawai. My grandniece, Tasakowit, and I were up at Evans Lake, and I had the honor of bringing our 10 to 12-year-old boys, young Huetwalos, young warriors, into the lake. And again, providing those cultural teachings to our future generations, our future leaders. And, that's what we do. All of our history is taught to us through our, we're then elders, and then they become ancestors. So we're honored to offer that song to you, called Hatskokwayo. Take our drums and beat it. Well, we'll have an exit song, right, Stu? Right, Stu? Yes.
We are deeply moved and with gratitude, thank the Squamish Ocean Canoe family for grounding us, for locating us in place, allowing us to feel in the room together, allowing us to celebrate and feel ceremony as we begin a discussion that I think touches many of us quite deeply. I look around the room and I'm really honored to see so many very important and interesting people from across the university, from across our community. I think this speaks to why this event matters so much to us. The event that we're part of tonight is the inaugural event in the Ideas in Action program by the President's Office. The Ideas in Action program is a new faculty and visiting speakers program led by the President's Office to welcome discussions, engagement around the key and pressing issues that are guiding our time, that are really shaping where we are and how we're living in the world. And we're honored that we are part of an opening to that ceremony. I mentioned earlier, my name is Stuart Points. I'm a professor in the School of Communication, and I'm at SFU. I'm also the scientific director of the SFU's Community Engaged Research Initiative. I had to make a joke about this photo because, man, does it ever look like an egghead? Did you ever see? Anyway, I'll leave that behind. It is something that we feel deeply touched to be part of bringing together. As part of the opening of the Ideas in Action event, President Joy Johnson unfortunately isn't able to be with us this evening, but she did want to share with us a welcome acknowledgement and message. So I'm going to turn over to the video now, and Edna.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the launch event for the new Ideas in Action speaker series. I'm sorry that I couldn't be here with you today as we discuss the importance of reimagining the public university to engage in the local and global challenges of our time. As all of us know, this is a moment of flux and change for the post-secondary sector. That change comes along with many challenges, but also with great opportunities to think differently, have big and creative new ideas, and then put those ideas in action to create real and lasting change for the communities we serve. I know that today's events will challenge and inspire you and ultimately create a sense of hope about the future of public universities and how we can advance an inclusive and sustainable future that we all want to see. Thank you to the organizers and the speakers for your work, and I hope you have a fantastic event.
Thank you, and we're grateful. In addition to the many people in the room, we're also grateful and really honored to have the Provost and Vice President Academic with us this evening. And so it's now my honor to welcome to the stage to share greetings Dr. Dilson Rassier, our, as I say, Provost and Vice President Academic.
Thank you so much, Stuart. As Joy, our president, said, she would love to be here, and unfortunately she can't. And I don't have much more to say, really. I know that the event is mostly about the speakers that we're going to have afterwards, the panel that we're going to have, and I'm looking forward to actually hear and to see everybody participating. I think that we all know that we live in a really complex time. There is many things happening around the world now that are challenging, that are actually imposing a lot of discussions and debate, and I think public universities have a lot to contribute to those debates, and and we are in a moment now. I mean, public universities are trying to rethink themselves, and everybody who works in a public university is engaging in this discussion. So I think this is absolutely timely and essential. This debate is actually incredibly important. We have many people in the room that are here to contribute. We have a panel again with distinct lectures and people that have been thinking about public universities for a while. We have deans, we have chairs, we have students. I was informed that we have with us the former National Chief Phil Fontaine as well. It's an honor to have the presence. So it's an incredible moment for SFU to get started with this event. So thank you very much for coming, everybody. I wish you a wonderful evening, and hopefully everybody's going to be engaged in the debate after we have the speakers here. So thank you so much, everybody, again.
Thank you, Dilson. And I thank you for acknowledging the presence of the former Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Phil Fontaine. It's a great honor to have him in the room with us this evening, along with so many other special people. We have a full agenda this evening and some incredible speakers, so I'm going to leave the stage shortly to allow them to take over and to share thoughts before turning to you, the audience, because we do want to allow a dialogue to unfold as much as that's possible in a room of this size with the full array of speakers that we have. We'll share those speakers and introduce them shortly. I want to acknowledge that in keeping with our opening and our welcome, we sat with and reflected on the role of Indigenous knowledge and presence in our program this evening, and sat with our own failure to really acknowledge that in the fullest way. And I want to regard and respect that in the way that we have learned from that, and to speak that openly. Just a few words on the program this evening. On this special occasion, our task is to think and even dream together. To engage critically as we imagine the role of public universities in a time when crises seem to be with us everywhere. So uncertain is the present. As my friend Adel Iskander said, so uncertain is the present that it can sometimes feel as though order itself is breaking down. And yet in this moment, it is equally imperative that we remember that when things break down, new beginnings, new directions become possible. Rebecca Solnit charges us with the work of remembrance, of recalling what has been done, what has been accomplished to build more just, equitable, and democratic societies. Universities have always been part of this work. They are pillars of democracy, places where we dream and make possible the outlines of a better world. Our task tonight is to engage these possibilities, not to forget what still needs to be done, but also to imagine a new dawn. So this is a time of hope for universities as much as crisis. And we have a remarkable group of people to help us explore these horizons. We begin, I want to note, with our community guidelines, which I think we had on the screens around us. To acknowledge, there are some housekeeping notes that I've been asked to share with you. You're welcome to take photos, videos for personal use. Please don't use flash. Closed captioning is available for those of us who are joining us on live stream on YouTube, etc. For those in person, you can also access the live transcript of the captions projected on the screen behind you. If you need assistance, please raise your hand. For those on YouTube, if you're having trouble hearing the speakers, take care of your volume. And we'll also have this evening, I want to acknowledge Slido. And the Slido is meant to encourage audience participation. So we've put on a screen a QR code, and I want to encourage you at this moment just to grab your phones to activate the QR code and to get everybody in a place where they can contribute questions and be part of the dialogue that's going to follow. We have 2 keynote speakers, and then we'll follow with a fireside chat with three additional speakers who will join on the stage. And at that point, we'll be inviting questions from the audience. So, just to make sure everyone's on their Slido, I wonder if we can ask you to think about and to contribute thoughts around this question. What is your hope for the public university in a time of crisis and need? If you can contribute thoughts to that to begin, that will help us to know everybody's with us and we're ready to get underway. Just before I introduce our first keynote speaker, Jessica Riddell, I want to acknowledge we're deeply honored to have over to my right and on the far side of the room, for those of you over here hard to see, Aftab Irfan is the Executive Director of the Center for Dialogue and Engagement at SFU, and she's kindly agreed to develop and produce a graphic visualization of our conversation this evening as it's unfolding. Tomorrow and the day after, we're going to follow tonight's event with a national dialogue with about 100 folks who are coming in from around the country to take part in that dialogue around the future of the public university. Aftab is beginning a graphic visualization tonight, which will continue over the next 2 days, and it'll help to center and shape the myriad of ideas that are going to come together to weave our thinking about the possibilities for the future of the public university. So Aftab, we're grateful to you and thank you so much. Okay, enough of me. We are now honored to turn over the stage to our first keynote. And our first keynote, Dr. Jessica Riddell, comes to us from Quebec. Jessica is the founder of the Hope Circuits Institute, a think tank dedicated to systems, rewiring and renewal in the post-secondary sector. She's professor of early modern literature in the English department at Bishop's University and the Stephen Jarlowski Chair of Undergraduate Teaching Excellence. In this capacity, she focuses on system change in higher education that fosters human flourishing. In her research, teaching, leadership, and administration, she participates in a wide range of conversations at the national and international level, and she's very kindly agreed to join us tonight and to get our conversation underway. So it's my honor to welcome Dr. Jessica Riddell.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be in conversation with you all. I'd like to start with a quotation from the philosopher John Dewey, who says that democracy needs to make itself anew every generation, and education is its midwife. And I'm thinking about this a lot, especially as we are watching the world unfold around us, feeling increasingly uncertain, disrupted, full of crisis. The geopolitical instability is alarming to us. I try to not dysregulate as I go through my newsfeed in the morning, and yet it feels pretty terrifying. And so coming back to that notion of education as the midwife grounds me in a sense of urgency, but also of meaning. And I was thinking about this. It was yesterday my youngest child's 11th birthday. And I was on the plane. I FaceTimed him before we took off. He gave me permission to travel on his birthday. He said, "Mommy, just make sure it matters." I thought, oh, gosh, I'm going to try to learn as much as I possibly can and take it back into our world. But I was thinking about the day that he was born, 11 years ago yesterday, and I was thinking about the labor, right? Where and how I was attended to as I brought this new human into the world. That the labor pains were both violent and messy, but also beautiful and surprising. That he was both expected and a miracle. That I was laughing as he was delivered. I had a very, very good anesthesiologist. So I was making a joke to my midwife as I was doing this, but I was thinking about this on the plane and what I could possibly contribute to the conversation. And it feels like we are in a moment of labor pains, that it feels hard and difficult, that we are bearing down at this moment. We're uncertain, there's always risk. We don't know how it's going to turn out, and yet we are giving birth to a new way of being as a society. And it's a metaphor I've been really trying to work through. Mark Carney's speech at Davos on January 20th. I don't know if any of you caught it. I was in Washington, D.C. I was at the AAC&U meetings. I'm a board member, the only Canadian board member at the American Association of Colleges and Universities, which is its own talk. But I was there and I was listening to Mark Carney talk about rupture. And I was listening to him say that we are no longer in a time of disruption, we're in a time of rupture. And I felt that in my body, I felt that in my core. I was really interested in what that meant, that disruption suggests that we have interrupted programming and we'll go back to business as usual. And he disabused us of that narrative of continuity, that there is no going back, that rupture means that we have changed irrevocably and we must reckon in the ashes of the collapse of continuity and sit and plant seeds of something else to emerge. And I was uncomfortable with rupture until I thought about it as labor pains, as bringing something into the world that is new, that is beautiful, that is hopeful, that is messy and hard at the same time. And that is the call that we have as a society, as a civil and just society, but I think in particular as our sector. Higher education, I think, is one of the only sectors whose sole mandate is hope. And by hope, I define it, I borrow the term from Ira Shore, who's a philosopher who wrote a book called Empowering Students, where he says that hope is challenging the actual in the name of the possible. So it's looking clear-eyed and candidly at the world around us and looking at it and understanding that our systems are broken and our systems are working exactly the way they're designed, and both of those things can be true. And we have to have the civic imagination to challenge the actual in the name of the possible. Something else is possible, and we can co-create it together. So I have 3 provocations that I've been thinking about and working through, and I would love your feedback about, especially at this moment where the world feels uncertain, and education for me is where I'm finding meaning, locating purpose, and finding hope. So I have 3 provocations. and I want to think through them with you. The first one is that higher education is a rehearsal space for creative futures. That it gives us an opportunity to imagine what else is possible, to sit in rumbly conversation with folks who think differently than us, who have different lived experience and intersectionality, who are coming from diverse spaces, that we can sit in rumbly conversation and rehearse what creative futures might look like. So that's my first provocation. The second one is that higher education in our classrooms, in our spaces, in our research, we are creating playgrounds for courageous becoming. That we are not who we are, something else is possible. That we can sit in emergence, that identity is not fixed, that we are constantly working on ourselves. I love Ava DuVernay's notion. She's a filmmaker, and she says, now that you know, what will you do? Right? So we know, once we know better, we can do better. And that doesn't just sit with our 18 to 23-year-olds, right? It doesn't just sit in our classrooms, it sits with all of us to be willing to sit in courageous becoming, that we can learn and transform and grow in conversation with one another. And the third idea, proposal that I have is that higher education should be an incubator for civic imagination. That what we can do is sit in the kind of courage of imagining what else is possible. Not just for ourselves, not just for our individual flourishing, not just for our singular prosperity, but as a civic imagination. Understanding we are entangled, interdependent, connected in ecosystems. That a civic imagination understands not just our own flourishing, but the flourishing of all of us. And so if those things are true, and we are going to spend the next 2 days and probably several months defining what courageous becoming is or what civic imagination is and tracing the genealogy of thought, sure. But if we can at least sit with those three provocations, that higher education is a rehearsal space for creative futures, we can imagine something else is possible, that it is a space, a playground for courageous becoming, that we can be somebody that we're not yet. We can grow, we can transform, we can stretch and widen our horizons, and that we are a place where we are incubating a civic imagination, that we are entangled with one another, borrowing from Desmond Tutu's notion of Ubuntu, I am because you are, we are entangled together. If those three proposals or provocations at least can hold, that can steer our conversation, the question becomes, so what, now what? Right? That's great in provocation. What does it look like when we anchor it in practice? And what can each one of you do in the room to participate in those conversations? And what I have known over the last 2 years in conversation with over 10,000 people at 70 colleges and universities, at 50 organizations and associations, is there is an appetite for hope. There is an appetite for doing something differently. The bandwidth, however, for the imagination to bring that into being is limited. We're tired, we're exhausted, we're depleted, we're isolated. The conversations politically are polarized, we're entrenched, we're siloed. What does it mean for us to sit in rumbly conversation, in collective sense-making, in order to imagine what is possible together? And I love this quotation from Loretta Ross. She's an amazing social activist. And she says, the difference between a cult and a movement is a cult is a bunch of people moving in the same direction, thinking the same thing. And a movement is a bunch of people moving in the same direction, thinking different things. And I love that because I think that's where we land in higher education, that we preserve difference. We don't just understand it as an inevitable, but it's our superpower. We can think differently. We can sit with people who experience the world differently. We can put together different kinds of knowledges, not just Western knowledge, but indigenous knowledge, global knowledges, the local knowledges. We can put them together. And Marie Batiste says it's not about aligning or assimilating those knowledges. It's creating the space for the convergence of different kinds of knowing to create the spark of something else that is possible. And that is our calling. That is our mandate in higher education. And I know this only because I am an accidental ethnographer of higher education. In the last 2 years, so I wrote a book that I didn't think anyone was going to read. It was an accidental book. It was in my pajamas in the middle of the pandemic. I got a pandemic puppy. I didn't do sour bread starters. I did do yoga with Adrian, with my dog, cat, and small humans. But I was sitting in a space of wonder. And in fact, on March the 12th, 2020, I could predict my life for the next 15 to 20 years. Full professor, endowed chair. I knew what I was going to make on my salary for my collective agreement. I knew everything about my world on March the 12th, 2020. And on March the 13th, 2020, we closed every college and university in Canada. My 4-year-old and my 6-year-old came home with their little backpacks and their indoor shoes. We were promised in Quebec it would only be 2 weeks. It was a lot longer than that. And then my husband at that time was not home. He was at the hospital. He was getting his lungs scanned because he had pneumonia. And it turns out a few days later that started a path to diagnosis of a life-threatening cancer diagnosis. So all of a sudden, on March 12th, I thought I knew what the world looked like. And on March 13th, I didn't. And I sat at that moment, pinned to the present moment, experienced a sense of groundlessness, but also a kind of vividness. And I reached out to folks with the earnest question of how are you getting out of bed in the morning? I didn't set out to write a book. I set out to get out of bed. And I reached out to folks who I thought, you know, these are hope warriors, they are bearers of light, they are luminaries. How are they metabolizing this moment in time? How are they making sense of the world that doesn't make any more sense? And from one conversation to another conversation, to 300 thought partners over 2 years and thousands of pages of transcripts, I sat as a learner, I sat in curiosity, and I sat in a series of questions with these beautiful humans. And from that, I distilled the 10 kind of conceptual tools that they use to get out of bed in the morning and to make the world better and more just and inclusive, not just for themselves, but for others. And justice, more just, I use from Cornel West's notion of justice is love done in public. And when I read that, I thought, that's what we are supposed to be doing in higher education. That's what we're supposed to be doing in our society. Justice is love done in public. And so I listened and listened and listened and distilled these 10 conceptual tools that I then wrote about in the book. And what I can tell you is I'm not good at these tools. I did not invent them. I just listened long enough to find it as a wayfinding, as a map, as a blueprint. And so I actually print this out for myself. This is in every purse and on every desk and on my fridge because I have to use it every single day. I have to use these tools to slow down and pause, to surface the systems, to practice divergent thinking, to live into questions, to reimagine authority and expertise, to sit in curiosity, and to build intentional community. I have to do that not as I figured it out and I got it all organized. My life is messy and unfurling in real time. But I use this as a way of metabolizing the moment and building mindsets where I can be in the world. And so this book was a kind of accidental book. I'm a Shakespeare scholar. I have no business talking about transformative change. And yet here I am writing a book I didn't think anyone would read. And in fact, when it arrived on my doorstep, I opened it and thought, oh gosh, I hope nobody reads this book. Because I say a couple of truth bombs out loud and then I write it down. With joy and love and invitation, I believe in higher education fundamentally. This is where I put my purpose. This is where I put my hope, even as I recognize these are colonial systems that are broken and flawed and messy and complex and change resistant. And the people within them are beautiful and have goodwill and mean well for the world in a kind of civic imagination. So when the book came out, I thought, oh gosh, I hope nobody reads it. A couple people read it and invited me onto campuses. And I have been on that road for 2 years, sitting in curiosity, in wonder, engaging over 10,000 people. And what I can tell you is there is so much hope. There are so many pockets of flourishing. There are so many people doing beautiful things in broken systems in the midst of heartbreak and horror. People are challenging the actual in the name of the possible. They're building intentional community. They're sitting in wonder. They're living into questions together. What I can tell you is 5 years ago, when I was going onto campuses, I'd get patted on the head by, university presidents who were like, now, Chicken Little. As I was like, the world is collapsing. We are experiencing paradigm shift. And they're like, yeah, it's fine. We're going to go back to business as usual. Fast forward 5 years, everybody recognizes we're in the midst of not just paradigm shift, but a collapse and a remaking. And that notion of John Dewey and democracy making itself anew in every generation and education being its midwife strikes me as resonant, strikes me as urgent. One of the things that John Dewey says as well is that he calls it a creative democracy. He says that whatever we think of democracy as monolithic, as an institution, as something that exists outside of ourselves, it already starts to collapse. That we are co-creating democracy in every encounter, in every decision, in every moment we say hello and choose radical humanization. Every time we sit in curiosity with our students, where we mentor somebody, we sit and listen with a willingness to transform, we are co-creating a civil and just society. We don't have to wait for something beyond us. We are doing it in real time. And that's an invitation for all of us to imagine what higher education looks like to our public sphere. It matters, and it matters now more than ever. Martha Nussbaum, a philosopher in the States, says that education is what keeps democracy alive and awake. And gosh, don't we need to be alive and awake right now? We have to experience the vividness. Even in heartbreak and horror in the world right now, we can also experience vividness and beauty and delight. Adrienne Maree Brown, one of my favorite philosophers and emergent strategists, says that we are addicted to the narratives of crisis, of loss, of lack, that we are telling stories about dystopias, but that utopias are also always entangled there. There is always beauty and abundance and joy and delight and humanity as well. And what stories we choose to tell and how we encounter each other is deeply powerful. It's a choice. The novelist Ocean Vuong says, we often tell young people that the future is in their hands, but we're telling them the wrong thing. He says, the future is in their mouths. It's how we tell stories. It's how we talk about ourselves, about our world, about humanity. And I think that that is a powerful provocation for all of you. Some of you are in the academy, some of you are not. Some of you are in the public sphere. Some of you may not have experienced post-secondary. I was sitting next to somebody on the plane yesterday who drove a bus for a school board on the island. He coaches rugby as a volunteer. He has not gone to university. He got a diploma at a college. And he and I talked about the public purpose of higher education. And he said, I've never gone there, but I believe as part of our Canadian identity. And I think that that's powerful, that we are all, every single person in this room is a steward of the university, that we are making it available, inclusive, accessible, even as we imagine and indigenize and decolonize it, understand that it is messy and beautiful and complex, and it also is the place where we rumble on a civic imagination, that we sit with courageous becoming, that we wonder together and rehearse what creative futures look like, that each one of us in this room is an architect of creative futures, that we are empowered, we have the tools, we have the curiosity, and we have the community to imagine what else is possible. We are in the midst of rupture. We're in the midst of something that is unprecedented certainly in our generation, probably in the last 80 years. How and where we respond is up to us. We get to practice discernment. And so if you are a member of the public, if you are an alumni, come and sit in these talks. Come back as an alum and mentor some students. Come back as a life learner and do continuing ed. Vote. for people who believe in higher education. Participate in the co-creation necessary for this moment. Engage, deliberate across difference with folks who think differently than us. And I think that's really important. How do we sit in these spaces where we meet people where they are, where we understand that they're going to think differently, but those fundamental principles of who we are and what we want to do in the world for justice, for joy, for delight, for flourishing is up to us. We have a portal of time. I think we have about 2 to 5 years. The dominant paradigm is collapsing, a new paradigm is emerging. We're in the interstitial space. We are in a threshold. We are pinned to the present moment, and we get to wonder together what this looks like. There are architects who already believe what a new paradigm is going to look like. One that is more privatized, one that is transactional, one that is focused on job skills and readiness. And there are architects who also believe that this is a place for courageous becoming, civic imagination, and a rehearsal space for creative futures. And each one of you gets to choose and then build and illuminate together. And it is such a pleasure to participate, not just tonight and to listen to the incredible co-keynote and my fellow panelists, but also to be in conversation, in rumbly, curious conversation with each other, because not one of us has an answer. Not one of us can figure it out and say, right, here's the 10-point checklist. If we do all of these things, the world will come right again. But we can do it together. And we can do it by celebrating and sitting in difference, celebrating and staying with discomfort, imagining something else is possible, and then building it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Okay, we have a lot more to share with you this evening, and so I'm going to turn the microphone over to our keynote, Dr. Amy Parent, who we're so grateful has been able to join us this evening. Some of you will know Dr. Parent as a colleague at SFU. I get to share that she's scholar, speaker, mentor, and educator, associate professor, Canada Research Chair in Indigenous Education and Governance in the Faculty of Ed at SFU. Dr. Parent is also the UNESCO co-chair of Transforming Indigenous Knowledge Research, Governance, and Repatriation. Is co-chair of the Indigenous Research Leadership Circle and the Tri-Council Agency, and the inaugural associate director of the SFU Cassidy Center for Educational Justice. We are tremendously grateful to have Dr. Parent with us. Welcome.
Twaixene Stewart, and I actually thought you had a really nice James Dean energy in that photo. So Ama Yuksa, good evening. And a big Twaixenism to our Sigamanak, our Simgigak, our Kubawilsish. And a big thank you to our Squamish canoe family, to our respected matriarchs, our respected chiefs, and to our beautiful new generation of students that are also here with us tonight, and to all of you who have come near and far to be here tonight and to engage what I hope is going to be a very inspiring and really meaningful time together. And thank you, Dr. Riddle, for your inspiring presentation. And also to all the folks that helped organize tonight. I can appreciate how much work goes into gatherings like this, and just want to say a big thank you. And also to our fireside panelists and my colleagues. I look forward to our further conversations. But I want to begin by introducing myself and recognizing that I too am an uninvited guest here on Coast Salish territories, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam. And I bore that term uninvited guest from a dear mentor and colleague of mine, who is also a colleague of ours here at SFU, and her name is Kawi Kalipio, and she comes from the Hawaiian peoples. And I continue to learn a lot about the way that she walks and the responsibilities that we have here within these territories. But I also have a number of folks, I've got to start my presentation here. I also have more folks to thank. So I have a huge list of folks, which include Cheryl Gabriel of the Kwantlen Nation, Cyril and Ed Pierre of Katesy. We also have Dr. Gwendolyn Point, and Gwendolyn Point, Elder Jim Q, Chief Harley Chappell, Elder Margaret George and Michelle George of Tsleil-Waututh, Sonny McCalsey, Elder Latash Nahaney of the Squamish Nation, and all of our dear faculty colleagues that you also see there in the photo. And if you look closely, you might see one of them here with us tonight. So I also would like to share that some of what I'm going to be talking about tonight also comes from a book chapter that I've had the great honor and privilege to write with many of these respected knowledge holders and respected leaders here, and it's taken us many years to get to this point. So I'm going to be sharing some pieces from that, and this book is currently, the book chapter is currently in publication, and I'm looking at Leith Davis, who's here with us tonight, and I really do hope that I got the title of the book right. I was trying to decipher some of the last emails that we had, and I hope that that is the title that we settled on, but it'll soon be published in the University of Edinburgh Press. But I'd also like to introduce myself and where I come from. So my Niska name is Nox Jowett, Nox Jowett Niska Ni, Amy Parent Wamaye, Whoops Nisjal Witwi, Simkanadani. So my Niska name is Nox Jowett, and that means mother of the Raven warrior chief named Jowett. And if I have one important thing that I want to share with you tonight, and I really hope that you're listening, is that I only go to war these days if I haven't had my morning yerba mate. And you can laugh. Okay. I come from the house of Nistal. I come from the village of Lakozap in the Niska Nation on my mother's side. And on my father's side, I'm French and German. And in the photo that you see behind me, it was taken in 2022. And in the photo, you see Samagat Nistal, Chief Earl Stevens. And that was also myself standing there. And we are connecting for the first time with a beloved ancestor, the Nistal Memorial Pole. And this totem pole had been stolen and taken from us. And so we were the first people in our family and within our house to connect with it in almost 94 years. And so this photo holds a really important memory in my heart. You'll also see that we are touching a raven crest in the pole. And my name is Jowett, part of my name is Jowett. And that raven crest represents my name. And in that lifetime, because this is a memorial pole, Jowett was next in line to become our chief. And Jowett lost his life protecting our nation's sovereignty. And so in this lifetime, I have the great honor of sharing this name with my brother, Samagat Jowett, Chief Calvin McNeil. But he's traded his warrior gear in for carving tools, and he's a gifted carver, and I think he's left some of these larger battles up to me. I think he's quite clever. He is a raven after all. But within my nation, we locate ourselves in this way to make our relationships and our responsibilities and our lineages to our ancestors, our families, our lands, and our communities visible. And this is a practice I encourage you to do and to consider enacting if you don't already do this. And it helps us be clear about our place, our power, our positionality, and our responsibilities. And it's from this place that I'd like to begin. I also say I always have a raven with me with technology, so I'm just going to ask you all for your patience. But we're invited here tonight to reimagine the public university, yet reimagining requires clarity about where we're imagining from and for whom. And what does it mean to speak of the public good while standing here on unceded Coast Salish territories? And what does it mean to return what has been taken? Many of us know that settler institutions often assert control through chronic underinvestment, procedural cooptation, and the selective appropriation of Indigenous knowledges, removing them from their living context and repackaging them without relational or legal accountability. we know that these systems determine what counts as evidence, whose sovereignty is recognized, which credentials and titles matter, and whose futures are deemed fundable. And as Dr. Lorna Williams of the Lilwat Nation, a dear mentor of mine, recently shared with me on the phone a few days ago, has stated, universities were built to exclude. And we know, as Indigenous peoples, that we're excluded from universities, and that historically we had to give up our legal identities through an enfranchisement under the Indian Act in order to access education. And that limited access really didn't begin until the 1960s and beyond. And so this history of exclusion, of course, is not unique to Indigenous peoples, but is distinct in how it's tied to land, law, and the ongoing denial of Indigenous sovereignty beyond performative recognition. I'm going to stay on that slide. But it's also the denial of Indigenous realities and what we call in Indigenous scholarship the colonial logics, the unquestioned norms and the practices that continue to shape our higher education institutions and society. The stories that live in our disciplines are not neutral. They separate knowledge from land, people from responsibility, and allow colonial relationships to continue even as we speak the language of reconciliation. So it's important that we talk about the emotional cartographies of colonialism in our present. Colonialism is not sustained just through systems, but is also through feelings and actions related to superiority, to fear, to guilt, and to shame, just to name a few. And these are not passive emotions, and I know these are difficult emotions. They can produce avoidance, defensiveness, projection, violence, and inaction, ultimately allowing harmful systems to remain unchallenged. And at the same time, I recognize that many of you are navigating other urgent pressures and realities, particularly in a time of autocrats. These realities matter, and they shape how we show up. And yet, I also am reminded of the humor and our collectivity. And it's really been this humor and this collectivity that carried us forward as Indigenous peoples. And for those of you who are non-Indigenous, I invite you into this space with a disposition of reflexivity, critical humility, and an open heart and an open mind. And really to consider how these emotional responses may shape your own and what it might mean to stay present rather than turn away from the discomfort amidst the multiple demands and struggles. And yes, you're allowed to laugh at my jokes. My children tell me that I'm a little bit cheesy, but I always wait for the eye roll to see how quickly they're gonna roll my eyes at my jokes. They're at that age. And it's through these acts of care that are grounded in unlearning, humility, and a willingness to remain present with discomfort that we can begin to disrupt the fear, especially when it's being framed as a crisis to sever relationships, to isolate us from each other, from our responsibilities and from our shared humanity. And Blackfoot Cree scholar Dwayne Donnell offers perhaps one of the most simple and the profound definitions of colonialism that I've ever heard. He states that colonialism is really about the severing of relationships from each other, from spirit, from our families, and from community. And so when I think about decolonization, or perhaps transformation, then it really is about rebuilding these relationships. They're not separate, they're all interconnected. And as human beings, we live in the logic of the stories that we tell about the world and our place in it. I don't believe that our system is broken. It's functioning exactly as it was designed to do. It's just changing. It's going through an acceleration period, a time of pressure of a changing economy and increasing demands for speed and resources, right? So it's an old colonial logic, which we might call colonial urgency, which is reinventing itself through speed, and an old need. And that old need also rhymes with speed and need as well. I might be a poet and I don't even know it. Okay, so the question is not how to fix it, but is how do we begin to transform our relationships to it and to each other? Not only by accommodating its logics, but by refusing them and regrounding ourselves here on Coast Salish territories. And it's in this space between truth and healing, complicity and accountability, and hope and responsibility that I look forward to the conversations and our actions that I hope are going to continue. So I like to share a powerful quote with my students when I have an opportunity to teach, and this comes from Nigerian novelist Ben Okri, who reminds us that people are as healthy and as confident as the stories they tell themselves. Sick storytellers can make their nations sick, and sick nations make for sick storytellers. But I imagine that many of us here tonight are present in disrupting the stories that have founded our disciplines, our societies, and the imperial and colonial empires that continue to benefit from these stories. At the same time, I'm very inspired and I continue to appreciate the good teachings that have been shared with me by Kwam Kwam Puyam, Dr. Joanne Archibald, who also states, so with so much wisdom, stories also have the power to educate and heal the heart, the mind, the body, and the spirit. And so I'm going to share with you a brief personal story, and then I'm going to move into a collective story on film. So many moons ago, when I was a doctoral student, and every time I tell this story, I get a year older. So I think it was about 12 years ago now that I was doing my PhD at UBC. I was in the UBC House of Learning. And I had the opportunity to listen to Elder Larry Grant from Musqueam Nation. And this was the first time that I had ever heard the story. Larry shared a story about Simon Fraser and his first interactions with the Musqueam people. And it certainly was not a story that was upheld here at university, here at SFU, not in my faculty orientation. And I know it's not the story that we have been taught in our schooling. So I'm just going to play you a clip here.
As a youth, I was taught that my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother dispatched our militia to apprehend Simon Fraser for the theft of a canoe at Kikate. And when I read Simon Fraser's journal, I see that he was very persistent in trying to acquire the canoe, but he doesn't say how he acquired it. He does mention threatening the people at Kikate to try and acquire the canoe. Our version of the story is that he introduced whiskey to them. They had never seen it before. He got them drunk, and when they were passed out, he left some crappy trade goods on the beach and stole their canoe. When they found out what had happened, they dispatched runners, couriers. They came to our community. We knew to expect him. We tried to apprehend him. You don't see any of that in his journal.
Okay, but it didn't take long for people to understand that he wasn't Chachels. I mean, even when he got down as far as Skowlitz, which is at the mouth of the Harrison River, if you read his journal, those people had a big potlatch, big gathering for him as well, welcoming him, but for the same reason, they thought that he was Chachels returning. But of course, once he got down to the mouth of the river, to where the Huemefquiam is, he ended up stealing a canoe from them, and so the Huemefquiam ended up chasing him upriver. And as far as I can tell, they chased him probably about as far as Matsqui or Abbotsford or somewhere around that area. But he continued back upriver, out of our territory.
So I feel that the explorer Simon Fraser, in my opinion, my head, he doesn't exist to me. Our people lived in this river for centuries and centuries, and he come along and discovered and put his name on it? Wow. No, I don't go with him. I'm glad he made it home, had his family started and stuff, but in my heart, he left me bad feelings. That's all I can say.
So he was a colonial capitalist for all intents and purposes.
A lot of our burial grounds are underneath pavements right now. And so that's where our history is. It's buried. And now our people have become artifacts. And so one thing that I want to say to you is let your students know that history is hidden, but the artifacts are making their way up. And with the stories that you go out and gather from all these people of how Simon Fraser has affected us along the Stalo, the river, it's affected us not just because of one man, it's affected us by a wave of thought, a wave of acts.
So Simon Fraser, I think the first thing they should do is look at the name. My name is Shishkovit. My name goes back through my grandfather's mother's side of the family. And it means one who works for our people. Stalo really means river. It's a name of a river. Chihuiak, that's where the people, as far as you can go with your canoe. They should find out what that mountain means and the resources there. They should take a collective look at the resources that are there. And they should take a collective look at who lived there and call it by its name. It's the same as, it has to have meaning. It has to have relevance. But I think keeping the name Simon Fraser is not doing any justice to reconciliation or the people.
So I'm so grateful to all of the knowledge holders for their time and their teachings and their patience and their grace. We began doing this film series in 2018. I was a new faculty member at that time, or a couple years in, I believe, and I had been asked to teach a mandatory teacher education course in our teacher ed program and to begin teaching about the lands and territories here. And so that invited me into a journey, which I continue with these knowledge holders to continue to learn about these important responsibilities here. But what we know from the series and from those wise teachings that were shared, that these are not just stories of the past. They're the living truths about how history continues to be told, named, and institutionalized around us. And if the institution's legitimacy rests on stories that erase Coast Salish sovereignty through glorified settler myths, then we need to begin by telling the truth. And the reason why this matters is that stories can also heal, as Kwam Kwam Koyam has already stated. And so within the field of Indigenous education, it's preferable for us to use the term story or traditional story. And there's also been a really important court decision, which has also resurfaced again in other ways around Aboriginal title. But as it pertains to Indigenous stories, we have the 1997 Delgma decision, which comes from the Supreme Court of Canada, where Chief Justice Antonio Lamar recognized in law that oral histories both embody historical knowledge and expresses cultural values. Hereditary New Channel Chief Richard Atleo explains that stories are not considered metaphorical or representational understandings, but embody truths from place that transcend spiritual and empirical understanding. And I have engaged methodologically and through the wise teachings of Kwam Kwam Koyam with Indigenous story work now since my master's degree. She's been a mentor of mine, and for my master's, my PhD, and my postdoc, and I like to tell people she can't get rid of me. But Indigenous story work teaches us that stories are both theory and method, and they have ways of carrying knowledge and teaching us about doing, being, and feeling. And so they don't ask us to simply think, right? And I think that's been a huge, huge issue with the universities, is staying within our heads. But it's also they invite us to feel, and they allow us to look at to allow the story to teach us. And pedagogically, when we work with Indigenous stories, we're invited to return to them over and over again throughout our lifetime, recognizing that our learning is lifelong and life-wide. And each time that we return to a story, we might have a different understanding of that, right? Depending on the experiences that we have, depending on maybe some of the mistakes that we've made. But each time that we return to that story, we're able to unfold different layers. And so that's really the beauty of Indigenous stories. But returning to the university, we continue to live with harmful myths that normalize the denial of relationship. We know that the lands and waterways were remapped and renamed and reframed as property. And we know that they will also be reframed as an object and a resource. The collective story that you heard from the knowledge holders is that of sovereignty in the present. Indigenous sovereignty has never been extinguished, and it continues. And as many of you are aware, we're also in a time of seeing a rise in anti-Indigenous racism, residential school denialism, and attempts to dismantle frameworks like UNDRIP and DRIPA. And historical amnesia is at an all-time high. And so this is not just about the past. This is about how colonial relations are being reproduced right now. And yet, for Indigenous peoples, this is nothing new. These teachings and responsibilities of ways of being have always been here. And we've also had other people who've joined us, right? And who continue to do that work with us. And so many of these folks are respected and have also spent generations with us working in solidarity to do the right thing. And many of you, I call my dear friends and colleagues. However, for me, I do hold a deeper question as we begin to think about our time together, and a question that doesn't have an easy answer. So what are the possibilities of genuine decolonial movement in the face of ongoing settler colonial violence, the dismantling of our rights, institutional inertia, and the deeply entrenched privileges that sustain these colonial entanglements on Indigenous lands and waterways? And how do we move beyond performative reconciliation to engage in meaningful reparative action and restitution by not only returning the stolen canoe, but by dismantling the very structures that have enabled its theft, if we're to truly reimagine the university and our commitments on these lands and waterways? Nope.
The youth?
Oh, see, I told you. I pressed the button and it doesn't want to work. Oh, I'm going backwards now, okay.
The youth?
There we go. And I always say, when I was a student, you gotta be careful what you say when you're a student, because I used to make fun of my professors, you know, back in the 90s when I would be in the back of the room and they didn't know how to play VCRs. And I would say, how many PhDs does it take for them to turn this thing on? And ever since then, every time I get up publicly, I have a glitch with my technology. So I do really think it does, they're trying to keep me humble. But I also want to say that what I've learned along my journey so far is that we don't all have the answers, right? And sometimes the most important question that we can ask ourselves really is, what is our next right step, right? During our negotiations with the government of Scotland in order to bring our Neastal Memorial Pole home, I had many moments of uncertainty, a lot of sleepless nights, some fear when I had to walk into those rooms and speak on behalf of my family. Something that Samagat Neastal told me the night before, after we ended our meeting. So that meant a lot of sleepless nights. But I also learned in those moments that in addition to what is my next right step, that it's important that we make our decisions based on our hopes and not our fears. That we make our decisions on our hopes and not our fears. Because it's these decisions that bring us closer to stronger possibilities. And it's these possibilities that also require activation of courage, of strength, again, sleepless nights, patience, and surrendering to the unknown. And in this case, it was really inviting and listening to the spirit of our ancestral grandmother, Joanna Moody. And the odd moment when Tamesum, the trickster, came in and had some fun with us. But for us, this meant that our rematriation, the return of our dear ancestor to our motherlands, really enabled us to make what I was told at the beginning of this journey, the impossible possible. I did have a faculty member who will remain nameless at the beginning of the journey laugh at me and say, "Are you serious? You're going to go to Scotland and you're going to tell them that Marius Barbeau stole your totem pole and that you want it back?" And yes, I was told that that wasn't going to happen. And so, and in moments I didn't believe it was going to happen, right? And so I had to question, what is my next right step? I can say, as it relates to the story of bringing our pole home, that I now carry peace in my heart, knowing that our children, the ones that you see here on the slide, will have another story to tell. And it's a truthful story. A story of who we are and what it means to bring a beloved ancestor and a relative home, and to begin to repair our new relationship with a foreign government and peoples. Did want to make one disclaimer after watching the news for the last couple of days. It was not David Eby who supported us in getting our totem pole home. It was the late John Horgan. And we did invite John to our feast, and we did want to thank him because he did take some steps after we negotiated with the government of Scotland on our own as a nation. He did send a letter for us to Prime Minister Trudeau and allowed us to have a meeting to talk about the airplane that we needed. But we did want to thank John Horgan, and unfortunately, by the time we had our feast and had the totem pole back, he was already quite sick. So David Eby came in his place. But I guess in closing, I did want to end with sharing a teaching. That the longest journey that we're ever going to take is from our heads to our hearts to our spirit. And so if we're going to reconcile anything, we need to begin reconciling ourselves by becoming whole human beings, bringing our heart, mind, body, and spirit into alignment, because it's from this place that we can begin to create and envision the possibilities of our next collective story. Thank you.
Okay, I feel like there's people who are going to come up behind me. Right. The task before us is clearly massive. We have had set out before us today, as our stage gets reset, the fact that crises and crisis thinking can lock us in and make it very difficult for us to imagine futures. Dr. Parent has laid out for us a deep and rich critique, but also a history that allows us to see a future differently, a future in this place differently, that we need to recognize and hold on to. Dr. Riddell has laid out the prospects and the possibilities of hope, and that hope allow us to imagine a time that is happening and that might be different, and that might bring a more positive and possible future. And for that, we're grateful to both of them for starting us off. It's at this point that I am very happy to pass over the mic, as this decorative mise-en-scène gets reset for us, to my friend and colleague, Dr. Tara Mahoney, who is the Research and Education Learning Manager at CIRI, at the Community Engaged Research Initiative. And Dr. Mahoney is going to lead our fireside chat, as well as to begin engaging the audience. So I welcome to the stage Dr. Mahoney.
Oh, test, hello. Thank you, Stuart. I was going to do a audience engagement thing as they turn the stage over, but the stage looks turned over, but I'm still gonna do it because I love this activity, and I think since we're all together in the room, let's just take a few minutes to talk to each other. I found those two talks incredibly compelling and inspiring and very different, but similar in some ways. The idea of colonialism as the severing of relationships really stuck with me. The idea of education as the midwife of democracy, and the labor pains as someone who has 2 kids really resonated at an embodied level. But I just ask you if you want to turn to your neighbor and maybe share 1 or 2 things that resonated with you from the talks. And then as folks are doing that, I'll invite my colleagues up to the stage for our fireside chat. So we'll just take about 2-3 minutes to just share with your neighbor about what resonated with you.
a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
Shoot. Just,
Should I bring my
no, it's, I don't even know what I just, I don't know. You realize it's one of those things where you like think about a lot of things and you have no idea if anybody's going to transpire. Hard to say good just right. That would kill the fireside chattiness of it all. Okay, you want to photo of us? Very spicy. Yes. Too spicy.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll walk out. Well, I mean, this is...
Okay, I think I will bring us back.
I can't wait.
Bring us back to
45 minutes?
45 minutes.
I can't wait to like tug on some of those strings.
Okay. I do, yes. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll just invite you to wrap up your conversations. Okay. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. Thank you. That always works. Okay. Does anyone want to share? Maybe 1 or 2 quick comments. Is there anyone feeling brave and wants to share what resonated with them from the 2 brilliant talks that we heard? Is that a hand up or is that a wave? Oh, that was a wave. Okay. Yes.
Drop the name Simon Fraser from the university.
Yes. Anyone else before we jump into the fireside chat? Oh, here.
Hi. Hello. So I'm a stranger here. I'm not from Simon Fraser SFU, so I'm an assistant professor of innovation and systemic change in UCW. So something that my heart is just, something that resonated is just the systemic change and education. So my homeland is Iran, and we are, as a nation, going through a really systemic change in terms of ideology, in terms of change, and then the ripple effect that how Iran in the Middle East is not just a country in a crisis, but it affects Canada, right, for example. So how we are in this together, right? And then, as a speaker thought, connecting to my chosen home, which is Canada, that I love, and connecting from my homeland, which is Iran, is really resonated with me that we really need a systemic change. And it's just the butterfly effect, because I'm also the researcher in complex adaptive systems. So the butterfly there will affect here in Canada. So to hope, to resilience, to actually the rapture that we're all experiencing. And yeah, thank you for that. Thank you so much. My voice is shaking, but thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing Iran into the room. I think a lot of us are thinking about that, so I thank you for bringing that forward. Okay, we're going to jump into our fireside chat. And before we do that, I'm just going to introduce my lovely colleagues who are here beside me, who are going to engage us in some conversation about the two keynotes that we heard and the topic more generally. I'm going to turn a bit so folks can see. So just by introductions, I'm not going to read out their entire long, impressive bios. I shortened it down to 2 sentences, but please do read them. They're on the website for this event because they're amazing, and these folks have done such incredible and interesting things, so I really encourage you to read their full bios. But I'm going to start with Dr. Nat Hurley, 3 down, there she is. Oops, sorry. Dr. Natasha Hurley is a professor in English and the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland, a position they've held for the past 4 years. Nat is highly regarded for their interdisciplinary teaching and research and is well known for their groundbreaking work on intersections of gender. Dr. Rakib Tesfaye is the Knowledge Mobilization Lead and Senior Scientist at the Bridge Research Consortium. She leads initiatives that bridge diverse perspectives to build public trust and advance equitable access to vaccines and immune-based innovations. And Dr. Adel Iskender is Associate Professor of Global Communication and the Director of the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies at Simon Fraser University. His work explores media, politics, identity with a focus on the Middle East and community-driven storytelling. So welcome to our panel. So I have a few questions to kick us off, but as I'm going through them, please use the Slido if you want to ask a question. Also, you're free to raise your hand as well. And I'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but we are quite limited on time. So yeah, just if you've got a burning question, you can add it to the Slido, and then we'll open it up broader towards the end of the evening. So I'm going to start with a question to the 2 keynotes. Jessica, you spoke about moving from a narrative of crisis and collapse and rupture to one of hope. And Amy, your work asks us to confront the colonial foundations of the university and the kind of, but as a sort of connected to that, the idea of the public and who's been included and excluded from the public in the public university. So how do we hold both of these realities at once, where we cultivate hope while also confronting uncomfortable truths about our institutions, especially when those truths can generate hopelessness, you know, when we're trying to change the system and on a day-to-day basis, it feels very grinding. So what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, and that's, you know, I was sort of sitting as a learner and listener and so inspired and moved by the work that you are doing and, you know, thinking about hope as challenging the actual in the name of the possible, right, means that we have to look clear-eyed and candidly at the world around us, and we have to confront and, you know, engage in reckoning and reconciliation in all of the ways, the staying with the trouble, the sitting with uncomfortable truths, the living into questions together, collective sense making. Hope has, for me, and I've spent a lot of time sort of thinking about and engaging with folks on what hope means. When I was starting to write the book, I started to interview people who I imagined were hope warriors, change agents, luminaries, and many of them said, I'm hopeful, but I'm not a Pollyanna. And that started to become a narrative that I kept hearing over and over, that people were even sort of estranged from the very concept of hope. And, you know, the Pollyanna narrative is one of, it's, for those of you who know Pollyanna, the movie, I've aged myself because my students don't know what Pollyanna is. They have no idea. But it's this young girl whose world collapses around her and she keeps saying, this is fine, this is fine. Everything's going to be fine. And that Pollyanna infantilizes hope and effeminizes it, right? It discards it. It distances ourselves from the very concepts that might rescue us or at least get us into conversation with one another. And so increasingly for me, hope is sitting in and large enough to hold despair, anger, rage, uncertainty, confusion, as much as it also holds laughter and delight and irreverence and playfulness. that it has to be expansive enough and large enough for us to imagine and invite ourselves in to that conversation. So despair is not for me the antithesis of hope. It's actually part of a hope circuit. It's part of I despair all the time. It's actually my default response. I hide under the covers. I howl into the abyss. I think I don't want to right now. And then my second learned response is, how do you put one foot in front of the other? As you said, what's my next step? And that notion of hope, Miriam Kaba talks about as hope is a discipline. It's something that you do and you anchor in practice. It's not a stance. It's not something that you imagine will happen from elsewhere. It's something that we do, and that we understand hope as strategic infrastructure. It's something you can action, and it's something you can action in your own context this week, this month, this year. So I have a lot of time for despair. I have a lot of grace for that as a first default response. And I think the next question is, what's our next step? Where do we put one foot in front of the other and make a difference in our own local and proximate spaces?
Thank you. And there we go, it's working now. Well, and I really appreciate the broadening of the emotions that we do have, right? And I talk to my children. Sometimes my son likes to go to bed upset, and I always remind him our feelings are like the weather, right? And we are going to wake up tomorrow and we might have a completely different feeling, and that's okay. And our feelings are complicated. And I think, the current systems that we're in don't always allow us to be honest and to really be real. And so I guess returning to, what I think is an important pedagogical practice is really looking at balance, right? Balancing some of the tensions that we experience and really trying to anchor ourselves in that way.
Thank you for that. One thing that stuck with me from your talk, Amy, was about, the question of, is it possible to return a stolen canoe is such a brilliant name for a film and an idea. And you talked a bit about this in your talk, but if we want to move beyond symbolic commitments to reconciliation, what are some concrete ways the institution might be able to live in right relation with Indigenous laws and lands and knowledge systems? I recognize that you have the strong suggestion of potentially renaming the institution, but beyond that, what are some other ideas that you've worked with in your
Thank you. I have many, and I have a wish list here. And just remind me if I don't talk about the need for us to continue designing our own institutions and for our own purposes. Just remind me if I don't get there. I get a little sidetracked and I forget where I'm going. But I think, we have to move beyond performative reconciliation. And again, this is nothing new to Indigenous peoples. We got to move beyond land acknowledgements alone. We need to move away from romanticized Indigenous policies with beautiful Indigenous artwork. It's not just a university name change, it's about substantive restructuring. It's not another Indigenous advisory table. And I think, when it comes to a leadership practice, people always want to ask me, how? And of course, there are no checklists, I agree with you. But it is important for us to find mentors and others that have walked the trail before us. And it might not mean going to your Indigenous colleague and asking them to solve, the next problem for you. But it's also looking around to some of the folks who have done this work and done this work well and are respected by Indigenous communities and leaning on them and asking them and getting their guidance. It's doing it with integrity and responsibility. And I think a really important word that we need to talk about again is consent, and keep on talking about consent, especially in light of the news in the last few days with DRIPA. I always see it as a and-all approach, right? It's not an either-or. We often get ourselves into these binary arguments in the university of oh, it's just this, it's that, well, we can't do this. Well, let's just do everything that we can do and do it well. But I also recognize that a lot of people are concerned about our current economy right now and about really, working with less. And so we need to talk about what we can do without money, right? And the simple actions that we can take. It's about the solidarity that we can form with each other, with these intersecting forms of oppression, how we can support each other through genocide, through war, through the challenging context that we're in, right? And for settlers, it's also sometimes thinking about when we step in and when we step out, when we listen. One of the teachings that Joanne Archibald always shares is that we have 2 ears on our head and one mouth. So we're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak. And when I think about your birthing metaphor, which I absolutely love, and that really connects to rematuration, I think about really reconnecting with the seasons and with the land and getting outside. And it's unfortunate we can't look outside right now and just see the beautiful waterways and the seasons that we're in. And it's interesting because I actually heard Joy Johnson talk about an important word, and that's flux. And right now, every time we go outside and we look, there's flux in the seasons. And right now is one of the most beautiful times of the year to look at rebirth, right? What does it mean to rebirth? And I think we can continue to learn so much and be inspired by our natural surroundings, by Mother Earth, and by all that she continues to give us. I'm going to keep on going unless you interrupt me. I would also say that it's more than respecting Indigenous knowledges. There's a term that I like to talk about, and it's really about uplifting and respecting Indigenous knowledge research governance, and that's supporting Indigenous peoples and continuing to determine what types of knowledges we want to share, when we want to share it, and under what conditions. And of course, recognizing that there are distinctions for us as Indigenous peoples. We're not all the same. And so there's going to be different protocols and ways of doing that. And it's important to respect that. An emerging issue, and this is something that is really important. I think there are a lot of folks here in the room that could support this. And this is, again, an issue that is impacting all of us. But I would say that this is the newest wave of colonialism, and that's technological colonialism as it relates to AI. And so, as we know, Canada is rapidly advancing our AI systems. And I had a chance back in October to review Canada's National Draft AI Policy. And that was a time, if anybody remembers, when I said was absolutely trying to push the quickest consultation period in Canada, I would say, with a 1-month consultation policy on their AI strategy. And looking at that strategy, I'm sure many of you aren't going to be surprised, but there was no mention of Indigenous peoples, Indigenous rights holders, nothing, absolutely nothing, not even Indigenous industry. And so that's a huge issue. And as I began to do research with Dr. Sanacharya Mintz, who comes from the Oran tribal peoples in India, she's a computer scientist, and recognizing that we have so few Indigenous computer scientists here in Canada, we do have to work with our Indigenous cousins elsewhere to really begin to engage with these issues deeply. But as we have begun to engage with Canada's infrastructure, and right now, we can look on Canada's websites, we can look at ISED, they're investing $2 billion right now in AI technology and developing some of our huge supercomputing infrastructures. And of course, that's not a bad thing. I think we do need this. But at the same time, some of the first Indigenous researchers who were able to walk into this infrastructure, because I will say that I couldn't get into Canada's supercomputers without Dr. Mintz, because she's a computer scientist, but she couldn't get in without me because I'm a Canadian researcher. So it's taking two of us to engage with this system and begin to learn it. And one of the things that we found out right away is that the whole system is designed around Canadian sovereignty, right? And what that means is that it's designed around a form of interoperability that is in direct conflict with our data sovereignty right now. And so that's where I need your help, right, is recognizing that if we are systematically excluded from AI policy, AI infrastructure, we can't actually go into these systems and redesign them in order to protect our knowledges and our systems right now. So that's where we do need some help. We need some advocacy. We need some policy around this. And those of you who are engaging with the Digital Research Alliance Canada and the supercomputers, just to really help, I really appreciate if you keep that in the back of your mind. I'm happy to have further conversations about that. But I will end with my last thing on the wish list is really just recognizing the need for our own institutions. And if we are to move beyond collaboration and looking at what really consent is about in partnership, it's about supporting Indigenous peoples to develop our own research institutions. And so a few years back, I decided that I couldn't be angry the rest of my career. I couldn't. I was just getting so frustrated. And so it was in one conversation with a higher ed leader that I realized, I had to just look at them and go, okay, one day they're going to be coming to us. One day when it comes to our Indigenous knowledge research governance, our knowledges, our systems, and our data, they're going to come to us. And then we'll provide a direction, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's some of the work that I find a lot of hope in, and currently working with a number of matriarchs here in BC, faculty members, and leaders in terms of thinking through and working together in terms of what that might look like in terms of creating our own organizing bodies.
Thank you. Wow. I just want to say we're doing the 2-day dialogue after this on Wednesday, Thursday, and the output of that's going to be a position paper. So I'd love to follow up with you about that list because it's an amazing list, and I don't want to lose some of those ideas because it's so rich. And
one other thing, because again, we are in a room full of people who can help with this, and just thinking about back to the AI problem, is also, again, I'm new, I'm taking a crash course in this, I'm learning as I go. But one of the things we also know is that we need more Indigenous computer scientists in order to be able to engage. And as we know, the K-12 pipeline is not doing its job. Well, it's doing its job. I have to reframe myself here. It is doing its job, right? But it's still excluding children. And the sciences are a difficult pathway for many of our learners. And what I've also observed from my interactions with Indigenous tech industry is that they're doing a far better job at recruiting our youth. You know, they were those youth, and they know how to train them. And when I look at some of our programming, especially in computer scientists, you know, the GPA that is needed, the skills, all these types of things are just more doors closing. And so with some of these training models I'm seeing with our Indigenous industry partners is that they are looking at the gamification of learning. They're meeting youth where they're at in their basements. They're paying them wages to play video games and do codes. And then they're bringing them into professional training and apprenticeship programs. And so I think if we want to do something innovative, we got to look at that, and we have to look at better partnerships. Now I'm done, I promise.
Thank you. Thank you. Nat, I wanted to turn to you now. So we talked, we know this idea of the public and who's been included and excluded. And one kind of thing that we were talking about on our pre-call was like the idea of risks and the university needing to take risks in this moment of crisis and transformation, and also the courage that is involved in taking those risks. And I was wondering if you had reflections on that as your position as dean and as an academic.
I have so many reflections. I've took so many notes about this, and they're all going out the window now. Because listening to you both, I just think we're at this really contradictory crossroads, right? Universities, and we'll put the kind of the money word on the table, are systematically kind of doing less with less, at the same time that we have a lot to answer for as a university, right? We've been exclusive, and so what university are we defending? And what are we called upon to defend? And do we want to defend everything, right, that a university has been and done? And I think of the concept of the public, and I'm somebody in my scholarship who studied the public sphere and the idea of the public as this abstract group of people. And, you know, my dissertation advisor was one of those guys who wrote a book on publics and said, publics are defined as relations among strangers, and strangers are hailed into being in the public. And I think, well, who has been estranged by the public? Like, I'm thinking, Amy, of your work, like, how do we need to rethink the public or obligations to the public at this time of crossroads? And it seems to me, and I was listening very carefully to what you said, so that's why I'm throwing the notes out the window, and I think that in some ways the biggest risk we can take is to hope with humility and to be open in a non-defensive pose, because I think when things feel like they're being taken away from us, we just want to defend those things. But maybe we need to think more carefully about that and to be open in non-defensive ways. And I think that's a big risk to take. Like, as someone who is a dean right now, I feel like it's my job to go out and fight for things. And sometimes fighting for things means you are not open. You're not porous, you're not open to the exclusions that you reproduce, and that we need to think about, you know, universities as sites of, you know, social reproduction, not just sites of defense and archives and repositories of the way things have always been. So I feel like it's a real risk to take to say, oh, I want to be more humble as a leader in this context, and yet to be open to those sites of possibility, the open mesh of possibility. It feels like that's a risk we can't not take, right? But we also have to be very reflexive about that risk and really kind of not just think of ourselves as people who are very sure about all that we know. Right? We need to learn with and from our students. We need to learn with and from the people who the university hasn't been open to. all the time, and I feel like the only way we can do that is, as you say, maybe to listen more than we speak, and to maybe think about how we're all complicit in the universities that we've built. That we, as people who have been, those of us in dominant groups, that we have a responsibility not just to reach out and include, but to self-interrogate. And I think that's what a university is, what it does best, is to be reflexive, to be self-interrogatory, and to therefore open up those pathways through a kind of mesh of possibility and humility that doesn't abandon hope, but which does take a hard look and understands how resources have been unequally distributed across institutions for a very long time, and not just now. So I'm going to stop talking there, but other people I'm sure have things to say.
Thank you.
both.
Yeah. I wanted to bring Rakib into this conversation because you're a knowledge mobilization specialist, leader, also a scientist. Many universities are increasingly engaging with communities through partnerships and public scholarship and knowledge mobilization. So for you, what does meaningful collaboration actually require from universities, and where do these efforts fall short? And what are like the practicalities, the processes, the how? Like, what has been your experience in that work and from where you're sitting?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, and I'm just experienced so much gratitude sitting here among these incredible folks and all of you, so thank you. In all my times of doing community engaged work, I think it comes down to partnerships, and the adoption of evidence and innovation moves at the speed of trust. And so I think we need to be thinking about meaningful relationships and how we build those. And so right now, you could take, there's a bunch of barometers and polls out there where we're seeing trust in institutions is eroding, where we're seeing fragmented information ecosystems. And we're seeing people turn to alternative sources to engage with because they're meeting them where they're at. And they're doing it in an authentic way. And so I think we need to interrogate this idea of authenticity more in our institutions. We are taught to communicate and engage in a specific way. There's a formality, there's a specific cadence to academia, there's a specific language, there is, Amy brought this up, we don't touch emotions, right? And so if you feel like you can show up in institutional spaces and be your full authentic self, what a privilege that must be. And so, I think about, okay, how can we create these meaningful relationships? And I don't know who said this because it was quite a banger when they did say it. But it was, they mentioned that the way that we build relationships typically in institutions is not like we do it in real life. It's like, it's done in the timeline of a Gantt chart. I told you it was a banger. It was good, right? And I think we need to kind of poke out what are the traditional processes and systems that are counterproductive to these meaningful relationships. So, practically speaking, how can we support, our research ethics board processes to be more nimble and flexible and responsive and attuned to the needs of communities, not just to participate, but to lead their own research. In terms of funding and our financial systems, I have this dialogue with communities that I work with, and you got to say, hey, well, we're going to keep the resources, we're going to steward this money, but we trust you. But actually, you can only spend it on X, Y, and Z. And oh, you want to buy that? We'll reimburse you in about 2 months, right? if that, I know 2 months does sound great. Retract, right? Who gets to set the metrics of what success looks like for these partnerships? Who's on the evaluation committee, right? Who gets to initiate and lead these proposals? And so again, I think, we need to, the word reflection, has come up quite a lot. And so we need to reflect on how these very entrenched traditional systems and what our values are, need to change, but we need to sit with it, and then we need to change these very tangible things that can be changed, right?
Thank you. I want to do like the snapping thing. Adol, I have a specific question for you, but I'm wondering if you wanted to respond to anything that's been said so far.
So much. I don't even know where to start. I think maybe to just go back to this discussion and the notion of the public and what the public university means and constitutes. I mean, one of the things that you said, Amy, that was very resonant for me is that the university was never created or was never set up, the public university was never set up in a circumstance or a set of configurations that made it accountable to the public, right? It was built on the foundation of colonialism, of patriarchy, of eradication and erasure of indigenous communities and genocide of local communities. And so with that being said, we have held it to standards that it quite possibly cannot meet. And so the question becomes, what does a public university look like in this sort of utopian way that we want to imagine it? And I would say that most of us who exist within the university context have been engaging in this reimagining in our own respective jurisdictions, in our classrooms, in our meetings, in our departmental conversations. We imagine and reimagine it all the time. But I would argue that it exists entirely in our imaginary. And so what do we do about trying to render our imagination real? How do we reify it? Here's a GRE word. How do we ossify it? I'll never use that again. But yeah, exactly, Scrabble. If I can get those letters, but I would say the problem that we face today is that we're trying as best we can to ensure that our institutions are aligned with our values. And I would go back to, and Jessica, you mentioned the Davos speech, and this is going to be a little bit of an alternative reading of that. One of the things that I interpreted and understood from our Prime Minister's speech was that even though, perhaps historically, we never committed ourselves to values, we performed values, today we have to go after our interests, and our interests prevail against values. That was something that I read clearly, but was largely obfuscated in the mainstream media. So that begs the question, what does it mean for us as public institutions, as public universities, to commit ourselves to values that we hold presumably so dear and we use as brands? This is essentially our brands. We are, SFU, sorry, I'm talking about the universities writ large, but we're supposed to be the radical university, right? And so this begs the question, what does it mean to be radical in this particular moment? Is it about radical imagination, or are we eradicating the radical from within us to ensure that we can continue to participate in the status quo? But what happens when the status quo is no longer the same? We're on shifting sands, right? So as the sands shift, how do we reconfigure ourselves in relation to that? And so I'm going to say that to be public, like any public institution, we must be accountable. And accountability is to our constituents. Who are those constituents? Thus far, we've talked about faculty, staff, and all of us here, the students. The students are who we should be accountable to. Are they happy with what they're getting in return, whether it's in the classrooms or in the way in which the university supposedly represents them and reflects their ethos? Are they in line with us? Are they on board? Are they here just to get a certificate and walk out? Or are they here because they want to be inspired? And that's a decision that every student needs to answer before they decide which university to enroll in. And so I don't have an answer, but I'm just saying that we are at a fork. And this fork is, do we continue as we are, performing publicness, while in reality, never meeting those lofty sort of expectations and demands that we put to ourselves? Or do we reimagine for real? And I don't know what that means or where that leads to, but I guess that's why the conversation's here.
Okay, I'm going to go to a question from, you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you in that, so thank you. Oh, do you want me to? Yeah. Okay, okay. No, but that's okay. Okay, are you sure? No, it's okay. How much time? Well, I'll open up to Slido and then we'll return to that question, okay? So there is a question on the Slido that's getting quite a few upvotes that I want to ask, which is, how can the university remain public when it is increasingly privatizing? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Come on, someone.
You want to take it?
Okay, go for it. Okay. Gosh, I'm neither a finance person or an economist. Like I don't have answers. I would say that for the university to do what it needs to do, it has to stop privatizing. The more we try to attract, large donations to be able to shepherd our financial situation, the more we become beholden to that, discursively, ideologically. And so what does it mean to be intellectuals in this current moment? Are we intellectuals for the service of those who are either the highest bidders or those who are prepared to spend the most money? That, I think, is the question that I mean, are we trying to survive universities on substantial donations? Now, I say this as the director of a center that only survives as a function of a major donation firm. So the irony isn't lost on me, but I think once we receive those donations, we have to commit ourselves to continuing to act in the best interests of this institution. And by this institution, I mean the public. Not the institution as in the university or SFU. We have to think beyond that. We are a reflection and an obligation to the public. And so if we continue to look at dollar signs, there's no end in sight. We will, the future is not gonna be one that will allow any of us to continue existing. In fact, we are working towards our own eradication. The eradication of what Gramsci called the organic intellectual. We will be in the service of industry, if we can survive industry.
Can I jump in there too? So I'm currently at a university in Newfoundland, the only university in Newfoundland. We are funded publicly at a rate of about 70% of our operating budget by the government. Yeah, it's very high. But that government has been, for a decade, systematically pulling money out of the institution. And we therefore exist very well fundedly from the government, I guess, by national standards, but also therefore at a political whim. The government announces how many seats will be in which program from the throne, right? There was a provincial election in the fall, and the local radio station, the VOCM, which everybody calls into, had a very unscientific poll. And do you know where education ranked in that poll? It was dead last, and I will say dead last after other. and so I say this only as a way of saying that when you exist at the behest of a public that is far greater, more interested in the status of public health care, and I totally understand that until we have solved this problem, then we are just as beholden to a very, very difficult set of interests in this context that are not being supported because the public, however we construe that, is not necessarily supporting the idea of an institution because there are so many public interests, right? And so I'm not here to say to defend, donations or weigh in, but it seems like a really tangly problem to try to solve. How do we get the public to care about institutions that are educational institutions when we have, a history of maybe not always doing right by all constituencies of the public, where we have some things to answer for, where, we're no longer a gentleman's club anymore, as that used to be the case, but, we have a history of not always doing right by all members of the public. I just think we have to think about what it is that we do for and to the public, and not just to kind of go and have an event at a lovely facility like this, but why would people care about us? Why do people who can't see how they're going to pay their grocery bill by the end of the month think their kids need to come here? Or what is it we do at the level of the idea or the research that kind of is part of the public good, so that we are not always in this defensive pose? We're always having to justify our existence, right? And that feels like a lot of labor that we could be doing with other kinds of other parts of our time. Right? Not that that's not a valuable thing to say what is valuable about the university, but I will say it is now 90% of my job. And I don't get to think about programs or decolonization or indigenizing the institution in ways I thought, oh, I'm going to be a dean of ideas. Ha, ha, ha. Right? Right? And it's just a really complicated thing. So I think that this thing that we're talking about public funding, public good, we have to do a lot of different kind of work. And I don't know what that is exactly, but it feels like we've lost some traction there somewhere along the way.
Yeah. And just to pick up on that thread, I think, when we ask the question, why don't they care? Well, what do we care about? We talk about these institutions and systems, they're people, right? So what is it that we care about? Why do we care about the publics? Why do we care about reimagining our relationship to them? Right? I think that question of why is often missing in this conversation. I often have these conversations. I've been teaching science communication for about a decade now, and we talk about why engage, why share our research, and oftentimes you hear like, oh well, it's taxpayers' money, and it's fun, it's cool, but what we want to anchor students in is that it's a fundamental human right. I mean, you can take from, the UN Declaration, Article 27, people have the right to participate in, to share in, and to benefit in scientific advancements, right? I think we need to start thinking about it. This is a basic right? And that gets lost in all of the noise.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the room for maybe just one question, because we're running low on time. I see you in the back there. And then we're going to have just closing remarks from the whole panel. So yes, please go ahead.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge. My question is, how is university or public university relating to military-industrial complex? Because recently there was a whole debate in the parliament about accountability of where our weapons are used. And the argument is, oh, the workers need to get jobs to create the bombs and all the murdering which goes with it. So I was wondering, in terms of our imagination, because a lot of our science students are now making bombs, and they say, oh, but we are making it's a user who has to be accountable and not the bomb makers. Thank you.
No, I don't know what to say. I feel like right now, if you follow the stock market and where you should be investing, it looks like it's arms, Palantir, AI. I mean, this is oil, fossil fuels, and that is where the decision making is taking us, both at the federal level, all the way down, trickling down to the municipal level, all the way through to our universities. So the question becomes, this is sort of that critical juncture. Are we prepared to do away with our values so we can monetize? And what does it mean for us to be acting in the public good? I would argue that the public good is to discontinue investing in anything that hinders publicness. And so the eradication of human beings writ large in all of its shapes and forms, whether it's the climate catastrophe that we're heading towards at record speed, or it's the complete decimation of entire societies using advanced technology, or mass surveillance of our societies, including our own communities, all of those are radically unacceptable. And that's not even a radical idea. So I would say that the university needs to, the university, when I say that, I mean it in the plural, all universities, any public university needs to commit itself to divesting from anything that is not in the public good, even at its own expense, financial expense.
Okay, I can take one more question from the audience, if there is one. Yes.
Not so much a question. Sorry. A parallel. Avi Lewis ran on a relatively radical platform and won 56% of the NDP vote. His dad lived just long enough to know that. The leaders of the NDP National in Saskatchewan and Alberta already have sort of said they can't support what he's doing. It seemed to me there's a huge parallel between what he is facing, what he did, and the whole theme of this meeting tonight, which is hope. And as Jessica said, the hope, all the difficulties of hope, but nevertheless kind of going for it. So regardless of your politics, I think it's a fascinating parallel with what you're going to be talking about for the next 2 days.
Thank you. Hope is in the air. Hope and solidarity. Okay, I'm going to invite the speakers as a closing to each reflect on the following question. If we were to gather again in 10 years and say that the universities had successfully reimagined their role in society, what would be different? And or what signs of transformation would we hope to see? Maybe I'll start with Amy and go down the line.
Oh boy, I didn't know I was going to answer that. Okay, well, I think we would all have a different answer, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's. I would hope in 10 years from now, at least within BC, that we have our own Indigenous governing body for our research and for Indigenous knowledge, and it's based on hereditary values and our systems and protecting them. And that's what I'd like to see in 10 years.
Oh, I was hoping it was going to go the other way. In 10 years, so I did this exercise 11 years ago with my cohort of 3M National Teaching Fellows. So there's 10 3M Fellows that get together that are recognized for educational leadership, and as a reward, we get locked in the mountains for 5 days with strangers and have to come up with some hopeful practices about higher education. And when I was invited into the fellowship, I had a 6-month-old baby named Henry Burns, who just turned 11 yesterday. And the age range was quite enormous in our fellowship, and I was the youngest by several years. And I brought the baby because I was nursing, and so the baby sat in the middle of the floor, and we sat in circle around this baby, and we had that conversation about what would it look like to build a university, to build colleges, to build spaces where we can imagine what it looks like in 18 years. And it has been an ongoing set of thought prompts for us as a cohort. We connect every year. We connect multiple times a year to say, how far have we come in reimagining and rewiring our systems for radical invitation, inclusion, accessibility, justice. And it's a question we're rumbling into. We hit the halfway mark last year, and we were despairing because we didn't feel like we were making that much progress, living into the question, but really despairing about the intractable and change-resistant systems that we've inherited. So that question is something I've been thinking about, and in 10 years or in 5 years, the world is going to look really differently than it is right now. Even 10 years ago, we could predict what a future could kind of look like, right? We could imagine strategic enrollment management, funding models, program development, continuity. We can no longer predict what's going to happen. And in these moments of uncertainty, We can't predict the future, but we can participate in inventing it. And I think that living into that question is really powerful. I don't have an answer that is adequate for the enormity of that question, but I commit to living into it over and over in beautiful and beloved communities with diverse thought partners. So I skirted the answer there. I think if you were to really say, like, give me an answer, Riddell, like, let's go, I would say that I would love to be able to imagine in 5 years or 10 years that we no longer use words like resilience, right? Resilience is managing in deteriorating conditions, that we can go upstream and change the systems that are creating the deteriorating conditions, and that we can instead recenter our conversations around human and ecological flourishing, that we are entangled, interdependent, connected. We imagine ourselves in relationship, in right relationship, in justice, in an inclusion, that we don't have to say, manage, pull up your bootstraps, get gritty, bounce back. We can say, how do we set conditions for flourishing in authentic, truthful, difficult, messy ways? So if I was to give you the answer, it would be to move from resilience to flourishing. But really, I think the quality of the question itself gives us the scope to rumble in community together. It's you.
It's me. Well, I think there are three things, and maybe I'll get to all three of them. But one is I would want us to stop having to justify universities or education as an expense, but as a civic investment in capacity building. But I think that means a lot of things. I don't think that just means, oh, we just kind of throw blindly money and drop wheelbarrows off in front of the moat and pull them in and never have to explain ourselves. I grew up in Newfoundland. I worked at the University of Alberta for 15 years. And everybody says, well, why did you go back? I said, well, I didn't go to Memorial. I said, but Memorial made it possible for me to go anywhere because it builds the civic infrastructure of the place. It trains the teachers. That's the place where the biggest library is. It's the place of ideas. It's the place where you learn how to be in government and engineer, all the things. And I just would like for that to be the case again, that we just see universities, and not just as a time of life thing, like it's not just for 20-year-olds. So I think that's one of the other things, a place that has an iterative function for society that people can keep coming back to for self-reflection, for imagining the world, for imagining the self in all these ways that it does. And right now, I think we have it concentrated in 20-year-olds and people who are post-career who can come back after when they have some time actually to learn again. And it feels like the education is sort of like bifurcated into these times of life. Not exclusively, there are exceptions, but to kind of think of universities as an iterative space. And I think what I wouldn't want to see as part of that, like people imagine, oh, well, we know in 10 years' time, we won't need feminism, we won't need intersectionality, we won't need decolonization. I don't think that. I think I want to be not defensive about those things. I want to have a university where the welcomeness and the encounter of difference never has to be justified or defended or made space for, that it is part of the thing that makes the university itself good.
Yeah, I want to live in that world. That sounds nice. I guess I'll pick up on the themes of pluralism here, where I hope that we can become a node of trust for many communities, where we can play a role in convening these diverse thoughts and perspectives, to be able to sit together in discomfort and to reimagine. A place where communities can come and set their own research agendas. And I think going back to the discussion of what does it mean to be a student in universities where, especially with the biomedical students that I work with now, is it enough to just leave with the mastery of a specific skill or theory? I have a lot of students, especially who are working on very timely innovations, vaccines, for instance, who have never been given this space or the tools to think about the moral and ethical dimensions of their own work, who feel like they need to hide it from their supervisors in the departments when they want to get training on how to engage with the publics. right? And so I want to rethink what it means to have a wholesome education where it's not just thinking about the skills, but thinking about how are we supporting, civically engaged and socially aware folks in our society. Where also people feel safe to do so, because I know a lot of my colleagues and a lot of students that I work with, because they're working on quite polarized issues at the minute, don't feel safe enough to engage. So what are we doing as institutions to keep each other safe?
I imagine a university that no longer, where it's no longer risky to think, believe, and teach and learn anything and everything that you want. There was a time, there continues to be a time, where the universities in North America are committed to working on and supporting scholars at risk in parts of the world where they are precarious, and there are many places like that. But that circle of risk keeps getting closer and closer. Today, many of our colleagues who are south of the border are living lives of existential, employment, because the work that they do is not only no longer seen as valuable, but is seen as actually dangerous. And that I never expected. I always was under the assumption that those ivory towers as they are, the only thing that was a redeeming quality about these institutions, including those that are private, right, was the fact that there was unhindered, unadulterated access to freedom of information, academic freedom, and freedom of information, and access to a lot of other things. But those rights are being eroded very, very quickly. So I imagine a university that is not only safe for everyone, but that risk is eradicated. It's also a university where we no longer talk about the relationship between the institution and its constituents and community, that the two are not apart, but rather they are one and the same. Communities exist within the university and vice versa. Any other sort of configuration is one that creates varying degrees of both polarization and hierarchy, and those hierarchies don't do community any good. And then lastly, I would say that I take inspiration from a speaker that we had come in here to speak to us at SFU, who is a dean of the Al-Azhar University in Gaza. He came to speak to us at SFU about a month and a half ago. His university, along with all 12 other institutions in Gaza, have been leveled to the ground. The universities no longer exist. 8 of the university presidents have been killed, many of their deans have been killed, and many of their students have been killed. And I don't want to leave on that note. The one thing that he said that really inspired me, and that is the take-home message, is that he said that even within that context, students inside Gaza thirst for knowledge and education in ways that are unimaginable. And they continue to apply to universities here and try to get in. There's one student who applied to SFU for a PhD program. Let's see, fingers crossed. Not saying anything to those who are adjudicating the application. But she escaped from the genocide with her degrees inside her underwear. That was the only way to preserve, because she knew the university would no longer exist to provide official transcripts for admission. That is how much people want to learn. And so, as in Gaza, as in Iran, as in everywhere, right? The university will continue to exist so long as it continues to be relevant, and its relevance comes from its ability to remain grounded in its commitment to supporting communities of learning and growth. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say thank you to all of you. It's been an honor to share space with you tonight, and I think you shared some incredibly profound and important insights. And we look forward to, Stuart's passing out some...
Card guy.
The card guy. And we look forward to continuing the conversation over the next 2 days and in the months to come. CIRI is committed to holding this space of convening for the next months and maybe even years to come. So thank you again. Thank you to everybody who came, and stay in touch and stay engaged with us. Thank you.
Just before you leave, am I on? Hello, hello. I'm on. I thank you so much. That last reflection, Adel, the desire people have to learn and the quest for freedom that it represents is just like a deeply resonant message for us today. And so thank you so much for ending us on that note. I want to share some thank yous. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being with us, for staying for the evening. You have lives, you have other demands. The urgency of what we're talking about clearly matters, and deeply grateful that you've spent your evening with us. So thank you. I also want to extend thanks to the Squamish Ocean Canoe family for opening. It really set us on our way in a most beautiful way. I want to thank our speakers who have offered depth and room for us to think together and to listen to their offerings. I want to thank my friend Janet Weber and SFU Public Square, who without this does not happen, and so I'm ever so grateful. To Joy Johnson in the President's Office, who's provided support for this event, and we're truly grateful. To Dilson Rassier, we're so grateful to have you here, and thank you. Aftab, I don't know if I can point this out, but wow. Wow. The richness that stands behind us and that will hold with us. Thank you so much, Aftab. To the SFU CIRI team, Joanna Habdank, Joanna Ashworth, Kiara Okongwo, Stephen Ta, nice. And to the many volunteers, thank you so much. We have food to break bread with us outside. Take it with you because we know it's getting late. Thank you and good night.